not only do educators have the need to be heard, but so do students. And then when I seen like those kids protest, I was like, these students are actually standing up for, what they believe in. The fact that they feel like a lot of minority teachers are not getting the same opportunities as people who aren't people of color, and they're standing up for that. I was like, I love this. So why not leave my experience so that they understand like someone that looks like them who's in this space, went through what they went through, but on the other side. So it's like me saying like, I stand with you.
Let's embark on the Arc Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times to free the voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times so all can build. Let's shine, yeah.
What up, wherever you are in this beautiful universe? My name is Kaya Nyambi Shivers. Welcome to Arc Republic, and Arc Republic News at that. Today we are speaking with Dean Brandon Miller, who is a dean at a Brooklyn charter school. However, Mr. Miller and I came into contact because I was looking through social media posts that came out with students at North Star Academy in Newark, New Jersey, had walked out in protest and staged a demonstration in front of Newark's courthouse, stating that North Star Academy specifically, but Uncommon Schools in general, had an anti-Black environment. North Star Academy is a predominantly Black charter school located in the city. And they said all the while, the environment does not support its Black teachers. And so it created a high turnover rate and a plethora of other issues. Well, Dean Miller, Mr. Miller, used to work there. He's going to give us insight. And we're just going to talk also about just the educational system, because it's changed dramatically post-pandemic. Okay. Welcome, Dean Miller. How are you?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Fine. You are so smooth. I know you're not like that when you are, Dean Miller, but we're going to be smooth today.
Got it.
So let's just find out more about you before we get into this issue. Male teachers and even men in K through 12 are disproportionately low, and has been that, I think, probably since the history of public schools in the US, maybe perhaps. But what made you pursue your career in K through 12 education?
I think for me, was just how I was in school. I wasn't like the best student.
Oh, you were a knucklehead, Dean Miller? Just like
I was always in the principal's office, always in trouble, suspensions. And I just felt like no one ever really connected with me to figure out like what was going on outside of school, like what was my mental capacity or whatever. So for me, it was just like, I just wanted to be what I didn't have growing up. So that kind of led me to being an educator.
Well, are you from Newark?
No, I'm actually born and raised in New York.
Okay, so you're born and raised in New York, right?
Yeah.
Which New York public school systems, well, pretty much the large public school systems and Newark's public school system has a history of a lot of issues and problems. I'm from LA Unified School District, so I know as well. How did you, in being that type of student? My husband was that type of student. We joke and laugh about him, because you grew up and we grew up. I'm gonna say I probably have about 10, maybe 15 years on you, so I grew up in a time where there was this introduction into of what is that medicine you take for ADD and ADHD? It starts with an A. It starts with an A.
Yeah.
Not adrenaline, not a but so several things happened. Black boys disproportionately were being placed into special educational courses, as well. They were given and actually the medication now is used, students use it to focus. It's not even used for what it was back in the day. Adderall, yes, exactly. Yes, that's it. And so, my generation was the generation where you saw Black boys, Black males more so than any demographic in the K through 12 educational system be railroaded into special education because a lot of white teachers, could not control them. So it was more behavioral issues. And then that became some type of cognitive issue. And so that carries on. How did you, in spite of, you always being in the principal's office, how did you make it out and then go to college? What did that look like?
I would say for me, my support system really is what helped me. Whether it was like my basketball coaches, like my mom. I think like the plan was for me to never fail, but to understand like you do have support even if people inside your school aren't supportive of you. So I think like the support system outside of the school really helps shape as far as like the vision of an individual that may have gone through what I went through.
Well, Dean Miller, tell me, what period of time did you grow up in New York, and what did it look like at your average day of going to school? Give us the details.
um, I mean, so since 1991 to about a year ago, I was a New York resident. For me, school looked like waking up, my mom waking me up, making breakfast, either walking to school, taking a bus, or getting dropped off, depending on what age frame it was. Um, I just looked at school as very social. I wanted to talk to everybody. I wanted to be friends with everybody. But I knew like when I had to do my work, I had to do my work.
Mhm.
But I didn't like it was sometimes it was like either my way or the highway, or it's like if you tell me to do something, it's like I don't really want to do that. So I would do it my way, and then that would lead to me getting in trouble, talking back because I just always felt like I was right, and yeah,
Did you feel like you were misunderstood a lot or targeted?
yeah. I feel like oftentimes like my voice wasn't being heard, or I was like shunned upon for having like separate thoughts from what the teacher deemed fit at the time.
Now, did you go to and you went to public school?
Yeah,
Did you go to a predominantly Black school? Was it a mixed school? Was it
it was
Latinx? Was it
it
Black?
was mixed.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. What was the demographic?
Middle class, Black and brown.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah,
Okay, all right. So you're in high school you're in middle school and high school in the 90s?
no, 2000.
Oh, in the 2000s. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Okay, so early 2000s, so the golden era of hip hop. See, I went to high school in the
yeah.
golden era of hip hop. Okay, so by 93 I was in college, right?
Got it.
So yeah, so I just want to know like the rhythm of the city at the time, because from what I understand, New York City, this is NYPD. They're doing the stop and frisks at this
Yeah,
time. Did you run into any of that? Like, what was it like when
of
you
course.
walked out of school? Yeah.
I would say like sixth grade is when I really started traveling to school by myself.
Hmm.
So you always run the risk of getting pulled over by the cops. Like whether you're walking to school, you'd be late to school. They could think like you're being a truant. Um, if you have a half day, they're not knowledgeable of that. You probably get pulled over. Like there's a lot of things that happened. But I think like growing up where I grew up, we kind of prepped ourselves for it. So we knew like at any given point we would be stopped for whatever it could be.
Hmm. 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 Okay, so you make it out. Where do you go to college?
I went to SUNY Old Westbury.
Okay, all right.
Eh,
Did that change? Was there a shift that happened when you went?
I think my journey to SUNY Old Westbury, because I actually went to three schools. So
Okay,
it's a long journey with that. But I
it's
think
all good.
and everything that I went through getting to ultimately SUNY Old Westbury, I think by that time my mindset was different in life because I had struggled so much just to get to that point. When I got
Mhm.
there, I was like, there's nothing that's gonna turn me back from what I need because at this point I already suffered everything that, someone that's trying to just get out of college could have suffered.
Right. So so I would say maybe roughly about maybe about 10 years ago, I started getting because I'm a college professor, students who did community college first and then they did the 4 year. Was that your trajectory, or did you kind of have to find your place at different institutions?
I did the 4 year.
Hmm.
Every school I went to was a 4 year.
Did you go to an HBCU and say, nah?
Now, I mean, I didn't go to HBCU, but my school was predominant. My ending school, Studio Westbury, was predominantly
Okay.
Black. So to us,
Okay.
we made it what it was.
Yeah, there's a term for it. Maybe they call it a PDI. No, predominantly
That's what
PBI, a PBI.
PWI. Yeah.
No, a PWI is predominantly white
Oh yeah, yeah,
institution,
yeah, yeah.
but
Okay.
I think maybe a PBI is predominantly Black
Yeah.
institution, right? Okay, so now when did you decide that you wanted to become a teacher?
Say the summer of 2016, 2015.
Okay.
I got to work at a summer camp and I worked with 3 to 5 year olds and I loved it. I was like, this is what I want to do. Prior to that, I wanted to be a journalism major. And I quickly realized like communications is very hard to get a job in communications. So
You're right.
I
Which
looked at
one that in which you would make money, correct, sir?
it.
Yes.
But I mean, I was like, I generally like working with kids. So let me go the education route. And here I am.
Okay, all right. So what made you choose charter schools? Was that your trajectory from college into the career?
Yeah, that was my trajectory. I started in the charter, so I just remained in the charter.
Okay, okay. Usually from, in the pre-show, I gave you a little bit about me. I was a substitute teacher for mostly high school students
Mm.
in LA Unified. And so I did, public school. I never worked in a charter school. When I was working there, though, at the charter schools, at the public school academies, there was this beginning of a push of Green Dot. And Green Dot is, LA, these big cities often are ground zero for economic, political, social movements. And so the Los Angeles was ground zero for the charter school movement. And so there were the beginnings of these people from, I don't know where, coming into the hood, that's where I'm from, right? And, I grew up 5 minutes from Watts, 7 minutes from Compton. And so that's where I taught. I mostly taught at my old high school, Washington Preparatory High School. And so they would come and at this time, public school education was in shambles, right? And so there was a lot of teacher turnover rates, so on and so forth. So these advocates begin to swoop in and educate the parents and say, you can take control of your school. And then these public schools start either flipping totally to charter schools, or it was like kind of like this bizarre, to me, it was a bizarre arrangement of it'd be like half public school, half charter school. I never got, how that got. However, what I did find out, at least then, was it was easier for somebody who wanted, and this is coming honestly after, what is that? What was that? There was a program where if you did not train as a teacher, you could work 2 years in K through 12 education. It was called the American.
Is it AmeriCorps?
The AmeriCorps, yes, exactly. Was it? No. Is it Was that AmeriCorps? Was it education? I forgot. So I'm sorry. Look, let me tell you a lot. Look, a lot of water is under this bridge, and so and so it's following this program. Right. So charter schools, as I understood it, was you didn't have to have the preparation rigor that a public school required you to have when you got in. However, it wasn't as maybe flexible as a private school, because there were some private schools where there were teachers who didn't even have their college degrees. Am I incorrect?
I mean, I can't really touch based on like the history of it, the trajectory of it.
So what was your experience? Like when you said I want to be a teacher, how did that happen? Why did you choose charter schools? What was that?
I pretty much got an opportunity to do partnership for after school education, which was pretty much like an after school program. I did that on like an internship opportunity. And then from there, I got into, I applied to work at a charter school. I was a health teacher and a basketball coach. And then from there, I got the opportunity to not only be in the classroom, but I got like my first opportunity to, be the dean, work operations. So pretty much get my feet wet to figure out where I wanted to be.
Oh, so you were appointed a deanship shortly after you enter into the school, because that's so different from how I came through. It was like
I mean,
you had to
it wasn't
bang it
like,
out for like years, and then you had to take courses and
yeah, it wasn't like,
yeah.
it wasn't like a head dean position, but I was like the associate dean. So I was pretty much a dean's assistant. So pretty much learning how to do the duties of the dean, but I didn't have the head dean title.
Okay. And so is the first job Newark Star Academy? I'm sorry,
No, no, no.
North Star Academy?
When I was in New York, I mean, I can talk about the Newark experience purely, but I was speaking about like my actual first experience into charter.
Okay, so what made you what made you choose North Star? So you're in New York, you're in the
Yeah.
charter school now system. What attracted you to North Star?
I just think like the overall structure from the New York uncommon schools. I heard a lot of good things about the New York uncommon schools. And honestly, I just wanted to try something different. I knew Newark wasn't that far, Jersey's not that far. I had the interview, and ultimately I became elementary school dean and worked about 2 years in Newark at the Liberty Elementary School.
Okay, so let's talk about the uncommon school structure. Can you explain it to people? So I don't want to get it wrong. How does that go? What does that look like?
So at the time that I worked there, it was very by the book. Scholars got to be in uniforms. There was like a high expectation for uniforms. If you weren't in proper uniform, you would get taken out of the classroom. We stressed parent communication. It wasn't very like diversity driven up until like right around the pandemic time happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to realize a lot of things that I was uncomfortable with, which ultimately led to me leaving. But I would say up until about the pandemic is when they started to stress like equality, equity, touching base on like having different diversity PDs just to touch base on the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay, so can you explain when I looked at uncommon schools, and I've been on and off in terms of seeing about the organization, it's kind of like a franchise, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Am I incorrect in saying
No, you're
that?
right.
So how many schools under the Uncommon Schools banner are there, roughly?
Well, it stretches from New York, Jersey, um, yeah, it depends. Honestly, I want to say about probably like 40, probably about
Wow.
40 schools. Yeah.
Okay, okay, wow. Okay, so we're talking about several dozen schools. Maybe is it Pennsylvania,
Pennsylvania.
perhaps? And we know, okay, so we know definitely Jersey and New York. Who oversees the uncommon schools, right? Because I'm wrapping my head around it, because in, like a school district, you have like school board members, right?
Yeah.
And then they make the decisions in different regions. Is it very similar like that in an uncommon schools that oversees 40 schools?
Yeah.
So there are board members.
Yeah.
Are the board members broken down into regions, or they just see all of the schools?
To be honest, I don't really know the structure of the board members. I just know like it comes from the top and trickles down.
Okay, what is the what is the racial layout of those who are in the top up or the upper echelons of the decision-making power?
I would say now it's probably more diverse than it was prior to me working there.
Okay. Okay. All right. And well, let's acknowledge this. When 2020 George Floyd protest erupted, a lot of institutions had to change, period. Right? Or because they didn't want to be on the wrong side of history, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of full diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that are being made, but prior to it was less diverse. Thank you so much for tuning in to Arc Republic. If you like what you see and you like what you hear, you can actually keep this mothership going. How? You can make a tax-deductible donation in several ways. One, Cash App us at Arc Republic Media. And you can also go on our website, arcrepublic.com/donate. As well, you can also donate to our fiscal sponsor and our sister organization
at Black Farmers Index, that is Cash App, or also go onto their website, blackfarmersindex.com. We are two Black women-owned media organizations who share our profits so folk can thrive.
Let's get into North Star. Okay. At what point did you begin to become uneasy with the lay of the land there?
I would honestly say it was right before the pandemic. There was an incident that happened between me and my DSO where I had a scholar whose family I knew couldn't afford the uniform, so they shared uniform amongst brothers. And one day he didn't have on the uniform pants, and I was told to take him out of class. And I was like, I'm not taking him out of class because he's not going to learn. Why am I taking him out of class for uniform? Like, that's something that we can, assist the parent with, especially because we know their situation. For me, that was like the first straw. And then after that, everything started to happen pre-pandemic. And then also with like the whole George Floyd thing, the way that was handled. It was a lot of things that just rubbed me the wrong way.
Okay, so let's kind of pick apart some of these things because it's so important. I think parents and those on the outside have a very clear understanding because the students were talking about how a lot of not only their voices were not being heard about issues, also how the students were not being heard. Yeah. And a lot of the changes that were implemented were more cosmetic and not necessarily structural changes. So did you take that child out of the class? Okay. Was there anything done to you as a result of that?
I mean, I had a follow-up meeting by not following school policy, but at that point, school policy wasn't valid for me. What was valid was having that kid in the classroom, not missing work.
Okay, so let's talk about around the George Floyd. Let's talk about prior to the George Floyd. You said something like the policies in place or just the way it operated, diversity was not important or a priority. If it wasn't a priority at North Star, what did it look like? What does that mean? If it wasn't a priority, then
I would just say like just the overall structure of the school in general, like the way kids will walk in the hallways, hands to your side, like the I don't want to say the commands, but the redirects that you're giving like scholars to get their attention, like it just seemed very like slave-like mentality to me.
You gotta break it down. I'm sitting here. I was like, are we in prison or like what is this going on? Like you had to walk down the hall with your hands to the side.
Hands to your side, yeah, hands to your side. There were certain phrases that were said where kids would know like track me, meaning like look at me and stuff like that. Like it was a lot of things.
Okay, we need to know what are they saying? Negro? Are they what is going on? I want to know. What are they saying?
So it was just like a lot of things. Like I said, like I forgot the exact phrase, but we would say something and kids would know to put their hands to their side. Or like there was like lines in the hallways where like kids had to walk on the line. So it was very like structured. Like we want you to stay in the line. Like where some kids they might need that movement. They might need to move side to side from, because they might feel uncomfortable. That just might be what they're used to. And that wasn't the norm then. The norm was you're standing still, head in front, you're walking in the line, your hands are to your side, you're following the teacher's commands.
So what happened if you didn't do that? Were you removed out of the line?
You would get pulled out of the line, depending on how egregious your behavior was. And 9 times out of 10, it wasn't nothing egregious if you're walking in the line, unless like you physically harm somebody. You would have a talk with the dean, or the teacher would talk to you, and then there would be like a parent follow-up.
Were there students who were suspended or expelled?
No. Okay. Never suspended or expelled. I mean, that doesn't happen unless, like I said, something egregious actually happens.
Okay. What is the demographic of the North Star, the elementary school that you worked at?
It was predominantly Black and brown.
It was predominantly Black and brown. Who was it? More Black than brown or more brown than Black?
It was honestly in the middle.
Okay. All right. Okay. Who got in trouble the most from your purview?
From my purview, the black and brown kids. I mean, I would say the black kids. Yeah.
The black kids, the black boys, black girls, the black kids in general.
Black boys.
The principal or the I don't know if you call them headmasters. I don't know what was the principals.
Yeah.
Were issues or concerns about how these elementary school students were treated? What you say, slave-like, prison-like, military academy-like atmosphere? Were they addressed at faculty meetings, or did faculty express concerns?
I mean, faculty did express concerns around student behaviors. And oftentimes like we would have like professional developments on like how to like manage like your classrooms and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say it was shunned upon. I mean, things did get addressed. I just think like if you don't fully understand the child as a whole, you're not going to know how to deal with certain children in certain situations. So my outlook on a situation might be different from someone who might not look or have the same experiences that I've had.
Were the principal was the principal white when you were there?
Yes.
Were majority of the people who made like the ultimate decisions, were they white?
My leadership team, yeah.
Okay. Were they? Well, they obviously weren't from Newark. Where were they from?
I think one was actually from Newark.
Lived in Newark or from Newark?
I want to say lived in Newark, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, because lived in Newark. I lived in Newark. I'm not from Newark.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's a whole different. It's a whole different thing. You can move to Newark and you could have a Newark experience that is totally void of what I would call all of the texture and nuance, right, of the city. Like if you haven't gone to all the wards, if you haven't gone to a barbecue, you know what I'm saying? And you know what I mean? You know, so that's another thing. This teacher could have lived downtown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's it.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Right. Okay. So this is the pre-pandemic. You said there was a lack of diversity. What programs around, were there any programs? What programs that spoke culturally to the students, what did they look like?
So, I mean, we definitely had celebrated Kwanzaa, had a Kwanzaa exhibition. We had a Black History show. Yeah, that was really about it, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, another thing that I would say throughout the schools is we would have like, I know like Cory Booker's on the wall. There's like some predominant, Black figures on the wall, just to give like a historical context.
But things were not really interwoven into the curriculum.
No.
Okay. All right. So this is pre-George Floyd.
Yeah.
And what happens after George Floyd? Because I know there were everybody and their mother was meeting, having meetings. People were apologizing. People saying that they wanted to be there. They wanted to understand. How did that go?
So I remember a very specific Zoom meeting that I had where we were sharing our experiences of what we went through growing up in the era of stop and frisk. So I gave my account of a time where some friends of mine and myself were stopped and frisked in New York after leaving open gym basketball that we went to. I shared that experience. It was very emotional. And then, a lot of my staff members, they poured out, appreciation and stuff like that. And at the end of the meeting, I had another meeting with my principal, my DSO, we would always debrief like how staff meetings went or whatever. And this specific debrief, I was told that when I gave my account of stop and frisk or just my thoughts on what's going on as a Black man in America, I was told that I didn't tie in like the educational piece that they were looking for. And I was like, well, it wasn't the educational piece. I was giving you my experience. Like this is what happened to me. You wouldn't understand because you've never experienced what I went through. So for me, that right there pushed me out the door.
Interesting. Okay, well, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
But what was the morale of the team? Let me before I say that, obviously there were conversations that were going on amongst those, staff and faculty.
Yeah.
What were some of the concerns that were brought up around this time about, like, this is really what needs to change?
I think, to be honest, that was right when like COVID had happened. So we had just transitioned into remote.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the things were like virtually based. One of the things that we did bring up was like, how do we talk about this to our students?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know if we were going to be back in the building or not. So our whole thing was like, if and when we go back into the building, like, when do we have a chance to talk about this? Or if we don't talk about it when we go back in the building, can we talk about it now? Because these are kids that live in these neighborhoods, that are watching TV, they're hearing people talk about these things. So they're gonna ask us questions. And I think like our biggest thing, some of the staff's biggest things was like, how do we have those conversations? Like, how do we start those conversations? Because these are elementary school kids that, yes, they're gonna have questions, but like, how do we answer them to a point where they understand? So that was like one of the biggest concerns that a lot of like the people of color had, was because they didn't want to lead a conversation that could possibly lead into like a check-in or a meeting where it's like, oh, you're not following the curriculum. So it's like, how do we integrate this into what these students are learning in my particular class?
So what was the resolve?
It wasn't one, to be honest with you. Yeah, the show went on.
Interesting. I'm, as you were talking, in my mind, in Newark in particular, that white person from Newark, did they talk about the tanks? I'm pretty sure they weren't in the part of Newark where the tanks were maintaining the quarantines during the time. Excuse me.
No, I was listening.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I don't know what part of Newark that particular person lived in.
Right, I'm pretty sure, because they would have been falling all out during the meeting, talking
Yeah.
about this was kind of like a concentration camp.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And like a lot of our teachers that actually lived in Newark were sharing their experiences, and a lot of them were getting like very emotional. So it's like, there's not an educational piece behind that. These are people literally expressing to you what they're going through. And instead of you listening to them, feeling them, and hearing them, you're kind of judging them by what they're saying, because it doesn't align with how you want this conversation to go.
Right. There is a pedagogy around grief and loss.
Yeah.
There is. As a professor, I had to change. I mean, because we were having conversations. First of all, Newark, I want to say, had the highest death rate in COVID. So some of these students are experiencing loss, people getting sick, issues with having access to internet. There were all these issues going on. So there actually is a pedagogical approach. And how do you deal with that? First of all, I want to say I'm sorry about that. I acknowledge your experience. I acknowledge the mental health toll that it has. That's why in the beginning I was like, what was it like growing up in New York? This is like the stop and frisk era. You know what I mean? Like you see police, you'd be like, here they come. You know what I'm saying? Like you sweating, like, are they coming for me? You know what I'm saying? Right? And to not be acknowledged as an adult did something to you, but the children not even having that conversation, as if their personal lives and experiences, which is more than school, has no value or is invisible, or there's like this, like, and for elementary school students, like for them to think that they could have this level of, I don't know if it's necessarily maturity, but acumen to cut your personal self off from your school self, right? That's kind of wild.
Yeah.
Okay, did you see any behavioral changes in the students? What was it like in the virtual space? What was education like in the virtual space?
It was hard because this is new for them. This was new for us. So it was like a lot of adjustments, a lot of getting used to. But at the same time, like you had kids who didn't even have laptops, who didn't have Wi-Fi in their house. So it's like, how do we still like get through to those students? How do we make sure that those students are accounted for? And then, you have some students who their first meal was breakfast at school, or their first or their second meal of the day was lunch at school. So it's like, how do we touch that demographic as well? So it was a lot of things that factored into like, how do we move forward? But pandemic learning was very hard. It was like very difficult.
Where were you at this time emotionally?
Um, I was pretty stressed out. I'm not used to just being in one confined space. I like to, if I need to clear my head, I can go for a walk. Um, if I need some fresh air, same. I can literally pick up and go. Like the pandemic kept me stationary. And I learned a lot about myself, but I also learned how to survive. I
Mhm.
learned how to tap into different, crafts, tap into different genres of like television or podcasts, whatever it was at the time. Like something kept me busy. So I think like the pandemic helped me personally just adjust.
And what was the morale of the students? Were there students having conversations with teachers about where they were and how they were faring in the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, you have some students that ask, when are we coming back to school, or I'm bored at home, or like I miss my classmates. Like you always have that. I think the biggest thing is just like we had to make sure that we created the space to ask those questions, because you don't want to just go fully into a lesson and not understand like what a particular kid is going through, to the point where they're not paying attention because something else is going on in their space.
So the point that you decide to leave, the tipping point you said was this meeting where the response when you told about your personal account, you
Um,
said it's time to go. How long did it take you to make the transition out?
out of North Star,
Yeah.
I was gone by the first day of school.
Of 2020,
Yeah.
fall 2020.
Mhm.
Were there other teachers leaving?
Yeah.
Okay. Were they mostly Black teachers, or what was that like? And
Well, it was a mix. I would say it was a mix.
it was a mix.
Yeah.
Okay. You left on a post. You left on a post about the academy. You said you talked about being drained. You and just going through a lot of also mental health issues
Yeah.
and just being tired.
Yeah.
What sparked you to make that comment? Because as a you're still a public, you're still a teacher. You still work with students, and sometimes there's this maybe perhaps desire. I know for me is to maintain this certain persona,
Yeah.
right? What triggered you to say that?
I think for me is I'm always my authentic self, whether I'm at work or whether I'm not at work. You're gonna get me. Like my experiences is gonna warrant like my responses. Like that's just who I am. I know how to get through to pretty much every demographic of students because I've worked with pretty much every demographic of students. So I know like certain things can't be said or can't be done with certain students because they don't understand it. So for me, leaving that comment was just really just tapping into like, not only do educators have the need to be heard, but so do students. And then when I seen like those kids protest, I was like, these students are actually standing up for what they believe in. The fact that they feel like a lot of minority teachers are not getting the same opportunities as people who aren't people of color, and they're standing up for that. I was like, I love this. So why not leave my experience so that they understand like someone that looks like them who's in this space, went through what they went through, but on the other side. So it's like me saying like I stand with you.
If you had the opportunity to be on the board of restructuring uncommon schools, what would be perhaps the top 3 to 5 suggestions that you would say need to be implemented immediately?
Um, I would say monthly staff circles. And when I say staff circles, it's just like giving staff opportunity to be heard, having like those awkward conversations. And you know, oftentimes that strengthens staff morale. If your staff is not happy, they feel drained. When they feel drained, they call out. When they call out, that affects students. So now there's no one to teach these students. So we have to worry about that first. Also, I would say, stress diversity in the classrooms, mix up the curriculum. Everything doesn't, they need to know about Black history, not just in Black History Month. The third thing I would say is centered around mental health, like frequent check-ins with staff, making sure like all of those resources are applicable because the school year is a very long year, March being the longest month. There's not a lot of room for error. There's not a lot of room for breaks. But honestly, people need to make that room and understand like if you have, days, you have to use them. They're there for a reason and not feel like there's a repercussion if you use your days. I think that's one of the biggest things. And 4 or 5, I don't know. I personally wouldn't go back to uncommon to be honest with you. So I'm gonna just leave it at the 3 that I gave.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That's something that they need to chew on, right? Because there are a lot of teachers who work there, and there are a considerable amount of students that look like us that attend the school. So it's important. Couple of more questions. You left and you're now at another charter school.
Yeah.
My first question is, with all the stress, with all the trauma you experienced, and everything you went through, you remained in education. Why?
Because it's bigger than me. I feel like I do what I do for a reason. I'm here to make sure that the mistakes that I made as a kid, someone else doesn't make those mistakes. So like, despite what my organization might be going through, at the end of the day, like I shape what I ultimately do in my position. And I think that's one of the biggest things that drives me to come back to work every day is because it's like no one controls my narrative as a dean, as a man, as a father, as anything. Like I control that. So how I touch these students, that's something that's going to last longer than a negative experience that they might have had. They might remember like how I helped them cope through that negative experience. So for me, that's pretty much why I am where I am.
Last question, because I thought I heard a baby in the back. I said, is that like a baby or something? Okay. Last question, Dean Miller. The pandemic taught everybody lessons about themselves. And also we had a lot of deep, reflective sessions about who we wanted to be, what we wanted to be in many different spaces. What does the educational space need to be in a post-pandemic world for students and teachers?
I think for both, actually, more social workers on hand just to talk about tough things that are going on, more mental health resources, more sessions in school that allow for student conversations and also for staff conversation. So like at my current organization, we do like student circles, staff circles, where we talk about, things that are going on in society. I'm in charge of doing like homeroom slides. So in every homeroom slide, I make sure like there's an affirmation. So I know like April's Black Women's History Month, we implement a different fact about a prominent Black woman of history every day for the month of April. So it's like just making sure like I create those spaces for students to, just understand different things and also have a space to share out as well as for staff as well.
You know what? Another question popped up. Can I ask it, please, Dean?
Yeah,
it's
sure.
One more, I promise you, and this is it, okay?
Yeah.
We could talk all day. I could be like, let me go get a drink because I got a couple of questions, right? But my question is, and this goes back to the young man you said that you were asked to remove him from class because he didn't have the proper uniform. Yeah. What is being done to address poverty and issues around housing crisis, especially because now you're in New York, there's like a huge housing crisis, evictions. What is being done for that?
For students?
Yeah, for students. Well, I mean, students and teachers at this point, right?
Um,
Okay.
I know I can only speak from myself and what I do. I know, like, if I have a student who has, like, let's say, like, they don't have, like, certain resources like a uniform, or they're not getting enough food at home, I try to, like, order extra uniforms so that they do have, access to that, or lead them to, like, a clothing drive, food drive, something that helps them and their families. A lot of times we'll make it whole school so that and no student feels alienated, but it's like we're giving you guys these resources to tap into, and also making sure, like, I tell my students, like, I have an open door policy. So if you need to talk about anything, as long as I'm not, like, in the midst of something, like, I'm always available to talk. So I think, like, those are the things that I personally do.
Wow, I thank you. I mean, you are a testament how above and beyond the duties and responsibilities of your job you go
Yeah.
every single day. I am proud to know you. I'm so grateful that you took the time out to speak with me. I hope that this conversation forwards and makes progress in all schools in the U.S. I always give the last thoughts and comments to my guests. Anything you want to say?
Just thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this. I feel like this is very important. Uh, and yeah, thank you for just taking notice of this issue and creating this space.
Brother's gonna work it out. Brother's gonna work it out. All right, Black man, thank you. You know what? It really makes me smile. Having male teachers in the classroom and Black male teachers who are young, energy, we
Yeah,
need more of that. We need more Black
definitely.
male teachers. We really do. Especially, when there's such as a need for a Black male presence that's positive and outside this narrative we spin. I could go on and on. Thank you, sir. You have a great day.
You
Thank you for
too.
stopping by Arc Republic, and, hold it down, 10 toes.
Thank you.